I had to go and grab. Good evening. My name is Terry Lomax. I'm chair of the Maritime Advisory Board. This is the June 20th, 2023 regular meeting. As is my custom, I just go around and introduce. So starting in my window on my left, Andy Fegley, who's a board member, Rita Wildey, another board member, Duncan Hood, board member, Debbie Goslin, board member, Jake Iverson from Watermark, who joins us thankfully, Beth Bellis, harbor master, Scott Allen, board member. We're blessed to have Eileen Fogarty here, is going to be our first guest this evening. Mike Tomasini, board member. We have Madeline from City of Annapolis TV, who keeps the program running. Kimberly Consoli, who is our recorder and does a great job with the minutes. And we have Hope Stewart on the economic side. So with that introduction, we'll pass on the regular agenda and we'll move right to Eileen. Madeline is going to do the PowerPoint. I can do it as a backup. I have it loaded also if necessary. You got to unmute. There you go.
Well, good evening. Glad to see everybody. And Madeline, do you, Jake and Debbie may be familiar with some of this because we just shared some of this a week or so ago with the council. But for everyone else, most of it will be new. So there we go. Madeline, do you want to put up the presentation and then I will just ask you to forward it. So you've all seen this image before. I'm going to share with you your chair's request, a brief overview of the progress with the resiliency project and also the next steps, both legislation and development. Next, please. Several of you were there last Wednesday, which was truly the grandest opening for a garage anyone had ever seen. Who was there besides Terry for the opening? Anyone?
Andy Fegley was actually playing in the Naptown brass band.
Well, great.
I heard we had the governor too.
We had the governor, we had bands, we had catering, we had pickleball. I mean, it was a great event. So the garage opened about a month and a half ahead of schedule and just under budget. I think they figured this out to the penny so that we could say we were under budget. So phase one of the whole city dock project is completed. And I'm looking to people like Debbie who've been here and Terry from the very beginning, and then most of the Maritime Advisory Board. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing. Next slide, please. So for the money, we are getting, and many of you know this from the P3 partnership, we're getting about $24.5 million up front. Again, this is not free money. What it is money that is added into the debt of the project, but that is what enables us to do the design and the early construction. Next slide, please. So when you look at the funding, we just found out today we're getting about another, where is the number? Another 4.38 from our federal delegation for $4.5 million, in addition to what you see here. You know, that delegation, Cardin, Sarbanes, Van Hollen, they've just been terrific, as has the state. The state put in a lot of money right up front. So we've got, out of the 54 million, if you add in the money we're getting next year, we've got about 45.5. But remember, part of that, 24 of that is added on to the debt. So we're going after a major FEMA grant. We're hopeful to get that. Compromise Street is not as well funded. Compromise Street is the flooding project, the stormwater, and that is funded about 17 million is still needed. But again, for City Dock and for both of them actually were in really enviable shape. Next slide, please. The City Dock Action Committee in February endorsed the plan, what we call the active plan. The Planning Commission endorsed it, the HPC endorsed it. And that has been very important because the plan is now actually being designed. Next slide, please. We've talked a lot about the resiliency approach, but working very, very closely with the Navy. It's a tiered approach for a line of defense from Gate 0 to Newman Street. Next slide, please. And you can see on this slide some of the elevations. We're going to be looking at the park is going to be 8. The infrastructure next to the park, Dock Street, is going to be about 6.5. We also have, we call them, I always say deployables. Why can't I say this word? Deployables that will come up to 8 feet. So if you look at that area where it's sort of a yellow line going around City Dock, all of that area has at surface level a structure that when the water comes through, it'll be triggered up to 8 feet. Next slide, please.
Eileen, real quickly, the pink where it says solid wall,
Yeah.
how tall will that be?
So the wall will be, because the top half of it is glass. I want to tell
It
you
says
the
concrete or
right,
other.
bottom half is concrete. The wall is, I want to say the wall is around 4.5, but I don't want to tell you incorrectly. And then the top part of it is glass. So
Okay.
wall it's around 4 with the next few feet glass. That's the only place we've put it. You'll be able to see into Donner Park because obviously people don't like the walls. The deployable structures are much, much, much more expensive. Just one sec, guys. Give me just a Okay, next slide, please. So you've all seen this when the mayor has been out doing a road show. But the basic concept is that this city dock, this new and improved city dock, really should be sort of the gateway. In many ways it is now, but this really defines it as the gateway for the entire rest of the bay. And Debbie knows this better than anyone, as this is really, they've provided that function for many years. Next slide, please. Next, yeah, okay. So in looking at developing the consensus plan, we had the consensus plan. We've now developed the first phase, which is the garage. But the other aspects that are really critical, first of all, activating the park, and with the park, the resiliency. Second, and as importantly from the mayor's perspective, we're changing the name from the Waterfront Welcome Center to the Maritime Welcome Center because it is going to be primarily maritime uses. A building right on the waterfront that will be there for boaters, for people from the community who want to access the water, for the harbor master. And then the larger idea is that post-COVID, all of this investment serves as a catalyst for investment in the state capital. So that's how, as we go forward and as we go for funding, we have been presenting the plan. Next slide, please.
Wait, hold
Eileen?
on. Sorry,
Eileen?
Eileen, Duncan has a question, and so do I.
Sure.
The
Okay.
this particular drawing shows that there is vehicular traffic that goes in front of
This is an
latitude
old
38.
drawing. There will be no cars.
So
Old,
that is removed, the ability to bring
Yes,
people
old-
closer by vehicle
old
to the
drawing.
waterfront.
There will be cars, and you'll see when you see the plan, there will be some access. But it will not be for, everybody going up and down. There will be access, and I'll wait till a couple slides down, you'll see the access.
Hey, Eileen,
Yeah,
Duncan here. I don't see these, the walls, the retaining walls that we had seen on the earlier plan. Are those drawn in here and I'm just not seeing them?
no, this is an older drawing. I'm gonna
Okay.
show you the current drawings in just a second.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then on the current drawings, you'll be able to see, Debbie, there will be access, but it will not be for the general public. So let's go to the next slide. You've all seen this, the legacy that we've been working with several people in the community on has really become something that is going to be woven into the park itself, rather than just one monument, really telling a story throughout the park. Next slide, please. This next slide shows you and you can see now a little bit in the background, Dock Street. Remember, the park's going to be up at 8 feet. Dock Street will still be there. It will be accessible by vehicles, but it will not be something where vehicles drive down to just drive through as they do today. So you've got.
I'm sorry, Eileen, but so the bus access and for seniors to get down to the dock, and also emergency vehicle access?
Emergency vehicle access is there. Emergency vehicle access is wide. Bus parking is, we'll use, there's a better slide in a minute. I'll show you that. But
Okay.
definitely have emergency access vehicle, and you have bus access and bus parking. So you've got really 5 components to the park. Let's go to the next slide. The first, this is coming, and you can get a sense here on the right. I don't want to give you the wrong numbers. The access is, I want to say it's at least 14 feet, but it's wide enough for a fire engine, so it's wide enough for substantial vehicles. You have that on both sides of the park. And this is the area that is the kind of the active area, the area with trees. Again, they're all movable. Ping pong, the kind of thing you see here with swings. So this is the wide area where there is access all the way down this whole side. Next slide, please. The fountain, we've talked a lot about. The idea of the fountain is very similar to what you have in Washington Square in New York, where the fountain will be flush, but you can step down and sit in the fountain itself. So it'll be an experience where people can actually sit in the fountain. Next slide, please. And that's in the middle of the park. The idea here is for the pergola, and the pergola will serve for a stage. It will also serve as shade. The pergola is being looked at either to be in the shape of a skipjack or a slaver ship. And so that's being designed right now by the architects. Next slide, please. This is an image of sort of the fountain with just a standard pergola behind it looking out to the water. Next slide, please. Here is where, now remember, this is elevated, but you've got a wide area on here, right, as part of the park that immediately adjacent to the park. And then Dock Street itself the last portion of Dock Street will be elevated. There is access, emergency access all the way down to the end. And there is a turnaround, again, primarily for emergency access, but for others as well, next to Harvey's building. That's why that area has remained open. So the bus parking comes out, actually, you can't see my arrow. The bus parking will be in front of basically Craig Street. This area is for bus parking, but you do have access all the way down to the water. And you also get to see the, this is more the pedestrian circulation, but you've got access on both sides of the park. The thing that'll be interesting is that the Welcome Center, Burtis, the park, all of that will be up at 8 feet. Dock Street will come up to 8 feet, but it will slope down. So you're going to have that area right in front of Latitudes will be lower.
Eileen, if you're at the Market House, I guess you can see the water in Eagle Alley. Will you be able to see over the walls?
Well, there won't be walls. What there'll be is an 8-foot elevated, go back a slide, 2 slides, please. Yeah, that one. What there is the park is going to be 8 feet elevated. So
Yeah.
if you're on Main Street, you'll be able to see over the park. But if you're down at Market, you'll have a more limited view. The views will all be from the park and from this area at the end.
Okay.
And like I said, the only area where there is a wall is at Donner. And that was done on the street side so that actually you have a fairly open park. When you get into the park, you've got a view. Let's go to the next slide. Does anybody?
Eileen, could I ask you a question about this slide, please?
Yeah.
Would you please outline again the second emergency access area? As Beth knows, City Dock is part of our emergency plan for Navy when we have an injury on the water for
Right.
meeting an ambulance. So I know Dock
Frida,
Street probably wouldn't
we've
work for us, but where's the other area?
Frida, we worked with the fire department the last couple months, and the access is, again, wider than we would have liked, but it's more than adequate, and it's definitely something that will work for you. So you've got access on Dock all the way down to what's labeled the Welcome Center, and you also have access on the other side of the park. You have a wide area that can be used there, and they've even designed with the fire department. The designers have designed the turnarounds for fire engines to get all the way down, and they won't do a full turnaround, but they have enough of a turnaround that it'll work for them. So that has been. We've had several meetings with fire, so that's all been addressed.
So if we're bringing someone in by boat, that's how we would transport an injured person to City Dock to meet an ambulance, would we come into near the Welcome Center and the Burtis House?
I would think, I'm looking at this, that would probably be the quickest way, would be to come in there.
Okay.
You're right, you've got the street right there, and then you think about an ambulance, you would go immediately over to Prince George and out.
Okay.
That looks like it would be the quickest. You can, again, a fire truck, this has been widened so that a fire truck can go all the way to the water.
Right.
But it's, again, that's a long, I would think you would want to come in right in front of what's labeled the Welcome Center, so that an ambulance would be there and you go right on George and get out.
Because I could see, if we try to come into Dock Street and there's no place to park our boat because it's full, we're out of luck. So over by the Welcome Center and the Burtis House would be much better for us. Thank you.
Yeah, and that, as we get close to, particularly to building that infrastructure, that's something, Frida, you ought to really make sure that right now, the Bertistock is controlled by the city. And you need to make sure that you've got space there. And I know Beth is on the call, but just to put that down in the list of things to make sure that, it's not a problem now, but to make sure it doesn't become a problem.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, and Debbie, I apologize, that 14 feet got widened. And I don't want to tell you the wrong number. I was in the meetings and I haven't looked at the drawings after meeting with the fire department, but I can get that number for you. Because they were, like you see trees there, we're gonna have pitiful trees because they wanted everything, cut up so they can get their trucks under. But it's pretty much a straight shot on both sides. And again, there's bus parking, but there's also the ability to get down to the waterfront. Next slide, please. So this is, and again, we're calling it the Maritime Welcome Center. This is a building that the park, to my knowledge, has a lot of endorsements, a lot of support. And like I said, even the fire department is finally pleased after much pain and suffering. But where there will be some discussion, certainly in the future, will be with the Maritime Welcome Center. The Welcome Center is going to provide a whole range of functions. The harbor master will be upstairs in the building. You'll also have showers, bathrooms, a lounge, a real maritime welcome center, maritime amenities. You've got the need for people to be able to, whether they rent paddle boards or kayaks, that will be in this structure as well. This structure and possibly some of the Bertis structure.
Eileen?
Yeah.
Hey, is the intent to keep the Bertis house intact and build the waterfront center around it?
The Bertis house will stay intact. The issue is that there is a different elevation. We are looking now at having both the elevation of Bertis and the Welcome Center at 8 feet.
Right.
The Bertis was going to be higher, was going to be on, I say, stilts, but let me just, I'm moving around here. Give me just 1 second.
And Eileen, we had talked before, quite a while ago, in regards to having paddle boards and kayaks down there at City Dock. And I thought that idea had been put to bed because it is not a safe place for that activity to occur.
Well,
and I'm
when
surprised
I
to
say
see that back in.
this is very much the mayor's vision. And there has not been any, what do I want to say? No one has been talking to anybody about how to do it or anything else. This is very much his vision. So that is something that there's certainly a lot of room for discussion on that in the future. But this is something that he wants to see. He basically wants to see people be able to access the waterfront. But yes, we had all those conversations, and they will, we're basically looking at another, I'd say year and a half till that all, becomes finalized. So I'll just say that it's his vision at this point.
So
But
Eileen, but his vision also, and I hearken back to the slide that had the city dock as the focal point for ferries going various places. But I thought we were moving towards this paddlecraft center round on the creek where the Naval Academy rowing is, and basically the Row Boulevard Bridge area,
Right,
for lack
So
of a better
what
word.
I would say,
College
Terry,
Creek.
I would
College Creek, thank
say
you.
is that this needs more discussion. And I'm not punting on it, but I know there were the early discussions. And then there haven't been discussions since those early discussions. And there is, his thought of, and I think his thought was more storage. I don't think it's even, but just someplace so that people can actually directly access the water. So I would put that on a list of things that we need to meet on, discuss, and then I can get back to him.
There are
I-
street
I
ends for
share-
that.
I share Eileen, I share Debbie's concern because Spot Creek above the bridge is fairly wide, and that's not really a conducive place for paddle boards. You get launching paddle boards out of the Burtis Basin coming out, they're going to get hit by somebody.
So I will offer up myself for more discussion on this topic, but there hasn't been discussion since the earlier discussions we had, whenever they were, a year and a half ago.
It might be prudent to just leave the word maritime amenities and not focus on paddleboard, kayak in the slide, because that
Take them out. I think
Yeah.
that's probably, let me make a note, Terry.
And don't put them back in later. It's really a safety issue and,
Yeah.
and I have
And
to say,
as long as people's expectations are not overly raised, then it's a lot easier to eliminate it. But if they keep seeing it, my concern is that the expectation is going to be that we'll just shut down the harbor to boat traffic so we can launch paddleboards.
right,
Right.
right.
I
And
will just say, given all of the grand visions that existed, getting the list to this was a major accomplishment, but I have no problem shortening that list.
Okay.
And I will say that the issue of access is important, and by not allowing a bus, no matter what size it is, to get closer to City Dock does become a block to access for students and for seniors, the people that can't or shouldn't be walking that far. And that is access, and that's a market that's a group of people that we need to think about.
And I will get, talk with Bryce again, but my understanding is it is there as an emergency. Basically, the emergency
I
access is
understand.
there. And I think the question is, can, in certain circumstances, the question you're asking, since the access is physically there, can there be circumstances where a bus could actually go there
Yeah.
as
The
well?
consensus plan did provide for that, and it was discussed considerably during the development of the consensus plan, and it has now been removed. And so I'm just bringing that up because I know it's important to the Naval Academy and certainly to Watermark and other charter companies that use the dock.
Noted.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And this image is a placeholder. There's been a lot of work done on the design of the building. It has a much more of a maritime look right now, with a much more of a nautical look, I should say, almost a coastal Maine look. But this is a placeholder, but to give you an idea that the building will be basically right at the water's edge. You're going to have decks and views. One of the thoughts that has been kicked around is to work with the watermen and have the watermen have some access where they can actually bring in supplies and have an oyster bar there. So that's just sort of a hypothetical thought, but we show it in this image. But this will
If you
be,
put an oyster, if you put you got limited space there to start with, and you put a bar in there. Now you've got, I think now you've got a waterfront restaurant.
Exactly. And that's what the
yeah,
mayor said that he wanted at the council meeting last week.
well, his idea is to have the watermen basically have their boats there and bring their seafood from there and have something very, very basic, like shucking oysters, the kind of thing you have in Savannah. I don't know. I went in the fall to Savannah, and Bryce Turner has used that as an example. When you walk along Riverwalk, like in front of the Marriott, these are not restaurants. They're basically like, a few tables and the ability to shuck oysters. But I am sure that by the time everybody gets done and this goes through all the hearing processes, who knows whether anything like this will come out at the other end.
He also said that it would be a venue space for events.
Well, I think what he's thinking of is there's a conference room in the building, and that conference room is going to have basically terrific views. That conference room will be used by probably the park service, all kinds of different groups, the visitors center. But with all that said, this building is going to be a water dependent use. So the other types of activities that are not water dependent, not the harbor master is water dependent, the maritime amenities are water dependent. Any of the other activities are going to be very limited.
Do you know how big the building will be? Has it been designed?
There's a footprint and it's in design process. They to fit in just the maritime amenities take really almost all of the first floor, and Beth, the harbor master, and the conference facility, meaning the conference room, take pretty much the second floor, and then there's a basement. It is probably going to be around 7,000 square feet.
Wow, you can actually build a basement there? That'll be interesting.
Very expensively, you can build a basement there. Very
Yeah.
expensively.
If you're up at elevation 8 feet, you're already sort of have a basement.
Yeah, yep.
And you'll be
Sea
impacting-
level is about, I think it's around 3.5 in this location. And so you're looking.
Duncan and I could fit.
I think it'd be a great place for a pool.
That's exactly right.
It might be if they don't parge the walls.
Anyways, let me make sure I have obviously the taking out the paddleboard and the kayak. I have the follow up on the access, meaning it's wide enough for a bus. I know that for sure, but I know in the plans that I have seen, the bus drop-offs are all located in front of Latitudes. So I have that question, and then any questions to follow up on this building for you.
So let me ask you, I was under the impression that the bus drop off was not even coming down to Latitude. But let me ask Debbie and Jake. I mean, I know I guess the current parking lot comes farther down.
Let's go back a couple slides so they're looking at the site plan, and then we'll go
But
so
I'm talking about the currently, I'm wondering how much farther is it from Latitude down than it is from currently, but I guess the parking comes down to about where the Welcome Center across the line of the Welcome Center. So
it comes right down to Susan Campbell Park currently. So
right.
the buses come down and stop there, drop off and pick up.
Right. So where that white area is between the fountain and Susan Campbell Park.
Correct.
And
If
instead,
Susan Campbell Park is in the same place on this
Right.
drawing, which I think
Right.
it is.
so the new drop off would be to come down to,
Craig
Basically-
Street.
along where the word street is on Dock Street.
No, they won't go that far. It goes to Craig Street. So it stops where that brick
The
is.
buses stop where, because remember, you're going up 8 feet. When you go from where you see parking to the park, that is elevated 8 feet.
I thought you said the bus drop off was at Latitude, which is down basically on Dock Street where the word street is.
Yeah, when I'm looking at this, the bus drop off officially is at Craig Street. There is, like I said, the very wide emergency access all the way down in front of Latitudes with a turn there. I do not think that has been, I'm pretty sure it has not been programmed for buses, but it has the capability to accommodate occasional buses because they could come in and turn out. But it has not been programmed that way.
Yeah, you said it was but for emergency use only.
Emergency use, yeah. So I will go back and talk to the architects and the designers about whether there is, what would be the issue if there were, not all the buses, but an occasional bus. There's certainly the capacity to, because there's plenty of width to take people in, I say a golf cart, but something like that, and get them down because there's good width on,
You
I
know,
think on
Eileen,
Dock Street, it's 20 feet and it's like 14 on the other side.
hey, Eileen,
Yeah,
would it be possible to bring the buses down Prince George to Burtis?
It's
Yeah.
too narrow.
how would, I guess that because there is a turnaround there, if you got down there, can you physically turn around?
It's very narrow, but it seems a logical sort of thing if we could figure it out.
Okay.
I don't think it's big enough, but you could certainly check with, the city.
I think
Yeah, I think you're right, Debbie, but
there's a Naval Academy about moving the wall.
The Naval Academy uses a city dock now for most of their bus drop off and pickup ever since 9/11.
So I will follow up on all of those questions. Let's go
Thank
back
you.
about 3 slides or forward about 3 slides. Yeah.
So if the buses turned left on Craig Street, basically, and then turned left on Prince George Street, they could theoretically back all the way down Prince George Street to the water and then come past the Burtis house. And right, that's not a heavily trafficked corridor
Right.
behind Latitude. Right. So if it's mostly deliveries there too, and the delivery trucks are probably making the same maneuver. They're turning, going in between the Crepes place and the Goozy Gifts, and then turning left onto Prince George and then backing up all the way in there because Prince George Street is one way between Craig Street and Randall Street. So you turn in there and you back all the way up and you cover that 100 yards of ground. And
Theoretically, that works, but you very often, as Eileen knows, because she's seen it, you don't have a group coming in one bus, you have them coming in multiple buses. And that's all. I'm not going to talk about buses anymore.
yeah, but if you remove the parking from Prince George Street down there, it becomes a much wider, it is kind of like a hidden parking spot. And it could become a loading zone, yellow curb on both sides, and then that makes it much more maneuverable for any kind of commercial traffic that's down there.
Get down there. Yeah, I follow that.
If I could jump in, Beth, with your observations from this season with buses between Watermark, the Naval Academy, and others, what are your observations and what do you think about this plan?
So I probably have more questions than answers. What I heard from Eileen was that this Craig Street was bus parking. Are we talking about parking or drop off? That's my first question. And 2, that's a relatively short area of street, and we often get 6 buses at one time. So all of this, I think, needs a whole lot more thought.
In meeting with Jake, we identified bus parking right up against the park. Remember, you're going along Dock Street and then you're elevated, and the bus parking was,
Are we talking about drop off or parking?
well, both. But the buses.
Because buses are not allowed to park
Yeah,
unless it's a designated parking spot. And when we park buses, then they really obtrude into all traffic patterns. So buses shouldn't be parking anywhere on Craig
We
Street.
met, Beth, we met with Bryce and Jake and figured out a location. And I've got that drawing. I don't have it here. I should have put it in this group of slides, but there's a location for the bus parking that was figured out.
I would be surprised if we're taking all of this new space and making it green space if we think it's a great idea to have buses parked down here, because we don't have room for buses to park down near Susan Campbell at the moment. So
right.
I'm not sure how we could possibly have room for buses to park on Craig Street.
Beth, it was resolved. I apologize that I don't have that drawing with me. I have that drawing and I've shared it with Jake. I will pull it up again, but I did not have it in this group.
Eileen,
Yeah.
just for the record, I don't know that it was resolved. I know that we spoke about it, but I haven't seen anything since.
Yeah, I apologize that I don't have the drawing. There is a drawing of where the bus parking would be. So I can.
Okay,
I'll check that
the
out.
communication we give to all of our groups is that there is no parking for buses down at City Dock. They drop off, they pick up, and they move on.
So Terry, without, and again, I have it in the files, but I am challenged on this stuff. I'm not able to pull it up.
Just if you
But
could,
I
ju-
can
if
do
you
that.
just
I'll
forward-
do that. I'll follow up with,
just forward it to me, I'll
Jason.
circulate it to the rest of the board.
I'll follow up, with Bryce and Jake, because it was out of that meeting that that Bryce drew it up. So I will follow up on that. If we could go forward, a few slides right here. So that is where we are in terms of the park design. But the next set of steps really have to do with the need to update the ordinance. The city's been working very closely with the Naval Academy. We had a meeting, a work session with about 75 people from every continent. It was amazing, on the Naval Academy and the city's partnership and what is being done with resiliency. Interestingly enough, a lot of these people were very interested in just the basic planning process. But now we're at the point, let's go to the next slide, that we are we're moving out of the planning into actually, to make this happen, introducing legislation. You know, we've gone through the consensus plan. Like I said, the phase 1 has been implemented. We have the dock design is fairly well underway, meaning we have the conceptual design, as you can see here, but the actual construction drawings are being prepared. So now there is an ordinance to allow the design of public structures to proceed. Let's go to the next slide, please. The city dock area, everything you see in that bright green is in FEMA flood plain. And what that means, FEMA requires buildings be built 5 feet above sea level. The city requires an additional 2 feet. Current base elevation is being measured from between 1.5 and 3 feet. Next slide, please. So the city has introduced an ordinance 01523, which is going to be have public hearing. I want to say the second week, the 10th of July. They've introduced an ordinance which would measure the height of new structures from their actual elevation rather than from 3 or 4 or 5 feet lower. You can see here in this drawing, you've got on your left the park, which is at 8 feet. Then you go down to 6.5 for Dock Street. And then over on your right is what would be the Maritime Welcome Center. So what the ordinance would do is, rather than measure buildings from below 5 feet or so below grade, 4.5 feet below their existing grade, it would measure them at 8 feet above sea level. And the benefit of this is, part of it is unlocking FEMA funding, federal funding for the city dock, because FEMA requires for one of the grants, one of the significant grants we're going after, that all of this come in together, that we have to come in with the park, the welcome center, everything together, and that it meet FEMA National Flood Insurance requirements, and that it meet the FEMA elevations. Next slide, please. On this, you get to see the park along with the other buildings. And the issue here is, as we go forward for grant funding, all of this goes in together for the elevated infrastructure, the elevated new public buildings, the whole thing, the design of all of this is what is being submitted for federal funding. So that is, we're optimistic about getting the funding, and we're also optimistic about having council support this ordinance. So that's, let's go to the
Let me ask
last
you a question
slide.
about
Yeah.
015. So if the council does not support 015, what does that do to the raising Burtis, and what does that do to first 1 or 2 rate of the Maritime?
Both structures would not meet the height requirement, because basically it would take off the roof or a floor,
Okay,
because you're measuring them from 4.5 feet below where they start. You're basically going down into the basement to measure them.
so in order to achieve the conceptual plan for the Maritime Welcome Center, we need to raise the starting point under 015, if I'm hearing you right.
Well, and it would apply to all new buildings within that AE FEMA floodplain district, because what you figure out is all new structures are going to be elevated.
Well, and that brings my second question is, so all of the buildings along Dock Street, latitude 38 and whatever else is
Let's
there.
go back 2 slides and I'll show you where it applies on this map. It applies to the area that is the AE that is in the bright green.
And what I couldn't tell from this slide whether or not that narrow strip of orange,
I can't hear you.
I don't think I'm muted. No, I'm not muted.
You're just kind of
So-
going in and out.
I don't know why that, I'm right in front of the microphone, but the area that is between the Susan Campbell City Dock AE portion and the Naval Academy green portion, that looks like a finger pointing out to the harbor. That would not be part of the 015 23.
I think that area, let me see required elevation.
Looks like it's called District 2, whatever that means.
That's the height district, but I think it is still in the floodplain, in the FEMA floodplain. I think the FEMA floodplain boundary is that thin blue line.
But I guess my question is 015 23 raise the starting point for the buildings that are the existing buildings along Dock Street?
Nothing that's existing. It's only for new structures. New structures, existing buildings are not required to build up the 7 or 8 feet. New structures are.
Ask the question a different way. If one of the buildings, the non-historic buildings on Dock Street were torn down,
A new building, and if it was in the FEMA floodplain, it would have to be elevated realistically 8 feet, 7 feet technically, but there's another foot that the city requires for building and safety require.
the short answer is if anything gets torn down on Dock Street's going to raise 8 feet along with everything else.
Correct.
Relative to each other, it'll somewhat be the same, but overall it's going to be higher.
Yeah, so let's go forward one slide. I think the next slide shows it. When you look here, Dock Street is going to be at 6.5. And so the park is going to be at 8. Now the 6.5 tapers down, but eventually all of that area should be raised.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have questions? Mike.
I think Beth has a question before me, but if and maybe I'm speaking on something I don't quite understand, but the city already has requirements when you're building in these flood zones for a certain height. It's not 8 feet, but there is a requirement. It's definitely not at sea level. If you want to build a new structure in a flood zone in the city, even residential, you've got to be a certain height above.
The height is, it's actually 5 and 2, 7, 5 FEMA, 2 city.
Right.
And then building and safety has, if there's any kind of a basement, either another foot or so for a basement, they add another foot. So
Right.
it's
We're not-
essentially 8 feet above sea level.
Right, but we're not talking about an 8-foot height increase for City Dock. We're talking about they could potentially be 8 feet first floor height above sea level, even though now they might be 3.5 feet above sea level first floor height. So we're talking
it would-
really about an extra 5 feet.
Right, Mike, it's the difference between 3.5 and 8.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's 4.5 additional height.
Okay.
Beth, you had something?
I mean, I have a few things. I guess what I would first want to say is I recognize how difficult these plans are. I understand that everything hasn't been thought of and it's just kind of fluid. But what I would say is our office had hardly been included in any of these plans. And I really do appreciate Priya's comment about emergency response, because they're really, when the docks are full, there wouldn't be a space for fire or police to collect and discharge a patient. I also would note that the schematics are not, they're not true to scale. So sometimes those places play triple or quadruple the width. And so I think that people may have some unrealistic expectations of what this final product would look like. And I understand like maybe that needs tweaking, but I think that needs to be at the top of the list because we're pretty far into this project. I also would echo, I think it was Debbie's concerns about paddleboards coming out of Prince George's Street. No, it's so dangerous. That should never happen. I know that's a mayor's vision, but it's not a good idea. The shared waterway competition there, we're looking at commercial boats that can't see that, and we're also looking at a lot of wreck boats that are coming down that Navy seawall. So that's not a good idea. And I know that Eileen said, oh, it's just for storage, but if we're storing them, we're launching out of there. So I would say no. That's a terrible idea.
Beth, I can't hear, breaking up. So what is a terrible idea on Prince George Street?
Launching small craft.
Okay.
Paddle boards.
Okay.
kayaks.
The competition there for the shared waterway from everything from commercial to rec boats to large boats to small craft, it's too competitive. And the boats coming down the Navy seawall, I'm not gonna see them. It's just a bad idea. We need to go somewhere else with those small crafts. But I think Andy wanted to contribute something.
I just wholeheartedly agree that paddle boards and motor yachts don't mix. The fact that no one's gotten run over yet is a small miracle in my mind. And especially when you talk about the origin of where boats launch, you got people getting on those boats that have never done it before. They have zero clue of the dangers they're stepping into being near other moving vessels. And the farther those different types of boats can be kept apart, the better. One other question, no one has mentioned this, any kind of bathrooms and replacement of all the existing facilities and the replacement of all the electrical service for the boats.
I really want to speak to that next. So
Thank you.
So Andrew, in terms of, let's go back a couple slides to the building. About 3 slides. Next one. So there are 2 sets of bathrooms. There are all of the bathrooms for the maritime users, the boaters from both directions, the water and the land. There are separate bathrooms and showers for the maritime community. And then there are also separate visitors' bathrooms, because remember, the harbor master building is coming down. So you're going to have numerous bathrooms, but separated, visitors separated from maritime.
And would that be on the main floor that we're seeing, the first floor?
Some are in the basement, I'd say the basement, in the lower floor, and some are on the first floor.
So,
Great, thanks.
so the schematics that I've seen are definitely have fewer showers, less square footage, and some really what would seem to be a wonderful idea about a lounge, but will end up being a terrible idea about a lounge because of crime, trash. So we have tried to weigh in on this meeting that we have been largely excluded, and we would love to be participants in these conversations.
Absolutely. I second that thought about the lounge. You know, I've seen that happen in a lot of places, and keeping a lounge clean and straight is a big deal.
So the issue with the lounge, I'm not sure I followed that. Is that an issue of maintenance?
It pretty much is. You know, my experience is, since this is going to be right down at the city dock, open to the public, you either need to make this lounge exclusive somehow to only boaters, or if we're going to open that lounge to anyone who comes in, the maintenance of that lounge and the upkeep physically is going to be extremely difficult, because they'll do a lot of volume through there.
So the lounge, again, these are, when I say it's not early days, but my understanding of what I've seen, the lounge is exclusive for the boaters. Lounge, showers, bathrooms are separate and exclusive for boaters.
So for example, someone would come check in with the harbor master and get a pass key or something like that.
I don't think the actual way it has worked out, will work out, has been defined, but yet they would be exclusive for people from who are boating.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would love to be part of this conversation, because even now, all of our small bathrooms are exclusive. However, people hand off tokens, and homeless are in there. I mean, we often have to clean up disastrous mess, call the police in the morning. So we would really like to be part of this conversation.
Eileen, are we close to the end?
Yeah, let's go to the last slide where you get the pretty picture.
Okay.
There's the pretty picture.
I had one thing that hasn't been mentioned. tonight, but which is very much mentioned in the consensus plan, is the view sheds. And I'm wondering how that has been taken into account, and if there's any, I don't know, 3D models that would be available.
So there
And-
are view shed modeling that's been done, Debbie. And the issue, first of all, there is a view shed. Actually, I took it out of this presentation. I have the view sheds. The issue is currently with Harbor Master, you have a blocked view shed with the Harbor Master building. The considerations for the Maritime building were two locations, essentially in the middle of this park area where it blocks as much as the existing Harbor Master building, or down by the water where it is much more of a maritime serving building. And what that blocks, it blocks much less than the existing building and much less than putting it in the park. It blocks a little bit of the view off to the left toward the Naval Academy. So yeah, there've been there view sheds and modeling on that, on all of that.
It would be, yeah, be helpful to understand that. And I'm going to throw out something, and I know you're trying to fit so many things into a small space, and I really appreciate you showing this to us, because it definitely changes. It's changed a lot over time. But I wonder if, because of the view shed issue and because of the fact that the buses are going to be dropping off at Craig Street, that's where you need to have public restrooms for the students and for the elderly that are getting off. Might you consider, or ask the designers to consider, maintaining some reuse of the existing harbor master's office? Maybe it's not 2 stories, so that you help the view shed, and then make that welcome center as small as possible out at the other end, so that you do try to spread the uses a little bit for where they're actually needed and help the view shed. So that's a thought.
What I would say, because that was fairly well, when I say investigated, drawings, designs of having this structure down at that end of the park. And there were a whole variety of reasons, but ultimately functionality, I think, was the primary reason. View shed was also a reason to not have a structure at that end of the park and to have the structure down, where it's been recommended. But I know there are a lot of drawings that were done early on, putting it at that end of the park. And
the
that
first
was-
thing that the people that get off the buses do is go to the restrooms, and they're not going to be able to do that. Some of them aren't going to be able to walk that far down. So again,
Can I put an oar in the water just for a second here? Vamping on Debbie's point, which is extremely valid. That little place where Sophie's Crepes is and Campbell's Auction used to be, is that building sacrosanct? Could that be turned into a bathroom welcome center for the public?
it's privately owned, I think, by the Chamblises, isn't it?
I don't know who owns it, but that's sort of solves the problem somewhat.
I have also, maybe I'm looking at architectural renderings, but how are we going to have a view shed with all those trees?
Oh,
The trees
Terry,
are-
there are not going to be very many trees, believe me. By the time everyone's been done, I mean, it's a serious concern of the architects and the designers, and actually it's a concern I share, that there are probably a third the trees that we started with. But there are a few trees. So the trees here at this end are in pots. The other trees are much, much, much fewer than you would typically have at a park like this.
And the trees are counterproductive to a view shed if you're trying to look at the water.
Well, I think one idea, which someone, the fire department pointed out to us, is we can just not have people come in June, July, and August when it's 95. And the fire chief pointed out, it wasn't actually the fire chief's an extremely reasonable person. But someone there pointed out that if we got rid of all the trees, that it would be fine from, mid-September through the end of May. So
There
that-
aren't trees there now, and many people come. It's prime season, so.
Yeah.
it's insufferable in the middle of the summer in terms of actually using a park, not just parking in it.
Well,
But-
again, you're talking about water access, and the people do come to the boats in the summertime, in spite of the lack of shade.
Well, I guess what I would say is I don't think arguing that there should be no trees in the park. I think that a majority of people would endorse having some trees and some shade.
I wasn't trying to suggest there's no trees. I just trying to
Neither am
suggest
I.
that why are we concerned about the view shed of the little bit of the corner of the Maritime building, Maritime Welcome Center, when more of the view shed is taken up by all the trees, and trees are fine.
Yep.
It's just that we seem to be focused.
I see
on
what you're saying, Terry.
a little
in
tiny
that-
corner
Yeah,
when literally you can't see the building for the trees.
and if this actually, Terry, when you look at what you're saying, you can see through this image that there are some trees that are looking in that direction where you wouldn't see the building anyhow.
Right. So
Yeah, point well taken. I'm used to, as you can tell, I've had numerous meetings with the fire department and like I said, even what you see here is going to be much sparser.
oh, it's definitely a challenge, and I think the points that have been raised here, and there's one final point that wasn't raised, is I didn't see anything to indicate or there was some type of a commercial pump out facility that we talked about over and over. But I think what has been raised is that there's a lot of discussion that needs to continue to happen, and probably when the architect is getting involved, before they get too many pencils to their paper, it might behoove them to come and speak with either this board at our next meeting, or at least speak with, and if they want to spepe with a group, a smaller group, I can poll and we can poll
They had,
through.
if you recall, we had a meeting, I think you were there, Mike. was
Mike and
there,
Rod were there. Yeah.
and
And
Rob
we
were
talked
there.
about
the uses, and they've followed very much through on the uses. So it would probably be good on some of these. And I made a big note. I know the pump out facility is on the list, but I have not seen it on any of the drawings. And I think we're probably at a point over the next month or two that it would be good to have a discussion with them and get, make sure that a lot of these details don't get overlooked, because now the drawings are underway.
I agree, that would be helpful. Yes,
Yeah.
Beth.
Last thing, I see all these pines that are driven off of the seawall, moving down the linear docking space. Can you tell me what that is, Eileen?
What are you pointing?
There's pilings that are driven off of the seawall coming down Ego Alley. I can't think of a possible reason for these. Can you tell me what those mean?
I'm not sure where you're pointing to.
I think you see the
it's-
row of boats that are backed in on the right-hand side of the
Yes.
drawing. And then if you look along the walkway there's a whole bunch of sticks in the water that represent pilings that have been are shown, and they don't seem to serve any purpose.
I think it's an overzealous architect.
That's all. Yeah.
Okay, We'll go with that.
One other thing, refuse removal, because the trash trucks will have to get down somewhere close to the end of the dock. And I know Bryce was aware of that because when he and I met 2 years ago, he mentioned that, but we don't want it to get lost.
Good.
Uh,
Duncan?
One more quick and last question for it may be naive, but if these are pop-up seawalls in places, do they float? How do they pop up? Is it mechanical?
The water evidently triggers the flotation.
Okay, so my question really was, I mean, it may be naive, but if a lot of people sit on it, will it sink?
Let me show you where it is. So if you look at the park, you see that thin white line
Yep,
over by Dock Street.
sure do.
That's, let's see, and then the thin, I'm looking here, because it goes around Ego Alley. Yeah, it goes, well, actually, it comes down here and it goes all the way around Ego Alley. So it's flush with the street, so people wouldn't be sitting there,
Oh, I see. All right. Thank you.
flush with the road,
So they wouldn't be sitting on the road. That's good. Good point.
hopefully.
I assume that when they pop up, there went the fire access.
Oh, God.
They, it goes around Ego Alley. And like I said, I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, I just kind of raise it rhetorically because if it's popping up out of the street and the street is the fire access, it seems to me, hopefully somebody thought about the fact that a fire
Yeah,
truck-
I don't think that's an issue, just because we've just had meeting upon meeting with fire and we've gone through all these details, but I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Eileen, also, if we were to have a power outage in the city, that will not affect the seawalls? They're not powered by anything other than water brings them up to the level they need to be at?
The deployables are not powered by anything but the water, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Let's have a lot of hard questions, and they're hard mostly because you're a little bit ahead, slightly ahead of where the design is, which is good. You don't want to be behind it. A couple of the questions do have to deal, like Debbie's questions have to deal with the existing design, but a lot of this other detail, I think it is a good point to get both the architects and the park designers. BCT is the architect for the building, the master planner, and Mahan Reichel is the architect for the park. So good to get
Eileen,
that together.
it seems the takeaways here are emergency vehicles, bus parking, and refuse removal, as well as pump out. And those are very
and toilet facilities.
okay. Yeah.
And paddleboards and kayakers not being
Yeah.
there.
Well, yeah, that's that's
It's
a
not bus
relatively
parking.
easy fix.
It's bus drop off and pickup. So.
All right, it is 8:15. Unless somebody has more questions for Eileen, we will move on. We are going to thank Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
We
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Always
Not
learn
an
a
easy
lot.
group to come to on
Thank
these
you, Eileen.
issues.
Well, no, but
Appreciate
this is the right time to be doing it. So we will get a meeting with the architects, and because this is the time to sort of drill into some of these details.
And I think that it might be good to have them hear directly from the critics' mouths.
Yeah.
That would
No,
be
I think
great.
and they're at that point, and also the engineers, they're at that point where it would be good for them to hear from you.
Good,
Those to represent the maritime business.
So,
Okay,
thank you.
take care.
thanks, Eileen.
Thanks. We're gonna kind of jump around, and my goal is, since we used to get kicked out of Truxton Park at what, 8:30 or so, to not run these meetings to midnight. So there's a number of things that are just sort of routine, but there's one thing that we do have to address because it's legislation that I have to do a report back on. And that was the 2023, which they've sent over the lease, proposed lease for Chesapeake Nautical. It appears that and I sent everybody a copy of the lease. The lease in and of itself looked fairly standard lease, although I haven't compared it to, frankly, to anybody else. I'm going to ask Beth to probably weigh in first as to if it lines up with the city dock policy. But I did have one observation, one question. I can understand in the literature, I understand the vessel referred to as the sea, whatever it is, sea spirit or, but yeah, the sea spirit, which is a 60-foot little charter boat. But what is, Beth, what is this jet boat that's going to be operating out of City Dock?
So the jet boat is only supposed to be like 18 foot long. But this might be a pointless conversation. Because this lease was supposed to pass in early May. So they've missed May, they've missed June. Now they only have July and August. So they've missed April. They've missed April, they've missed May, and they've now missed June. So I don't know that they're interested. We emailed them today. I don't know if they'll be interested in like only 2 months.
Well, the lease dates were May, June, July, August.
Because that's edited. Originally it was April, May, June, July, August. It was 5 months.
Okay.
So we edited that because it never passed council. And the only thing that feels like it's a little unfair to me is Wilma Lee got theirs passed. They suspended the rules and they passed it. And so did Marine Entertainment LLC. They got theirs passed and the rules were suspended. But all of a sudden, this third group wanted a lease. And then the council was like, no, we want to delve into that, which is fine. But it feels a little unfair.
And they didn't bring those leases to our board, the first 2 leases to our board, which is surprised why it's surprising.
They
to see this one.
introduced them
And passed them the same night.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little weird to me.
It was, yeah, out of,
Some would say out of order. I will concur. But now, so now I have this group, which probably doesn't even want their lease anymore. Because out of 5 months, they only get 2 months. So we're talking about 4 weeks. And so they're well established in Back Creek. And we did email them to try to get a response, and we did not get a response.
So let me ask a question, because we may possibly be able to I won't say short circuit, but come to a consensus on a report. Is there anything in this lease in terms of the details of the lease, set aside the type of vessel? Is there anything in this lease that does not comport with the city dock policy?
If you're asking, you know.
Okay. Then I would assume, knowing lawyers sometimes can be take the easy way out, is that it was nothing more than a cut and paste of names from the first 2 leases.
Of course.
Having been said, it wouldn't seem to me to be particularly fair to this group just to make any substantive comments about the lease, other than that if it A, comports with the city dock charter policy, and B, it is consistent with the terms and conditions afforded other lessees, that we have no objection to it. However, I would propose to add the caveat that we were surprised to get this lease when the first two leases were not brought to us as they should have been.
Fair.
So it's my backhanded way of making a motion. Mike,
Second,
So moved, Terry. That's great. Beth, is there a reason why this lease has taken, I mean, like a procedural reason why this lease has taken longer? Did Sea Spirit not put in their paperwork in time to get before the city council on the same night as the others?
Yeah,
Or-
so I think they didn't take a bite of the apple early enough.
Right.
And so I think
And
like,
what we're really getting is a pilot lease for 2 weeks in July and 2 weeks in August, if they want.
if they're even so interested.
They want. Right. So, yeah, Terry, do you want to clarify? It's so long as it complies with city doc policy and
terms are consistent with the prior two leases.
in terms are consistent with the prior two leases, that we comment favorably on the lease for Sea Spirit. And what was it's both the same it's the same company.
It's Chesapeake Nautical. Chesapeake Nautical Cruises Inc. is the lessee.
So moved.
Any second? Somebody's got to get unmute.
Sure.
You need a second?
Yeah, well, it's a
Okay.
motion.
Okay, I second.
Okay. Any
Quick
any further discussion?
Quick discussion.
Sure.
We said it was a jet boat.
Well, in the information that I sent you, there was a little, somebody called it a legislative summary, looked like this. And the second page of it was that.
Oh, that's entirely different than what I thought it was. I nearly got run down in New York Harbor by a monster boat called the Beast. The last thing I want to see happen here.
So this looks like kind of a weird craft, and the fact that it's by Smoky Mountain Boats leads me to believe that it's seaworthy on a lake, but I wonder what it's going to do in a 4-foot chop on the Severn River, an adverse current to a north wind.
As long as it doesn't go 85 miles an hour, I feel better.
Well, I looked it up and I think, doesn't it do 60 knots?
I suspect it does.
I think it does.
So I will
Where's it
tell
going to
you
do
that-
60 knots?
I will tell you that the Coast Guard gave him so much, the Coast Guard was super hard on him. So that boat can't do hardly anything. It can't do much of anything because they gave him so many rules.
I mean, I'm not
be
sure that
interesting to see
The
this.
certificate of inspection, because whatever those limitations are will probably be reflected in the COI.
It has to go pretty slow. You can't do much of anything. I think he was sorry he purchased it.
I'm not sure that going slow is very stable.
I'm not in a jet boat.
I don't remember exactly what he told me, but I remember thinking, oh boy, you're sorry you purchased it.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the details.
All right, so, any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you. I'll circulate a letter, probably tomorrow and put just to those points and, be done with it. Let's see what else we have in terms of any, particular, items. I don't see Hope, and I don't blame her for dropping off. I'm just, I know what I put on here, Alan Miller had raised it, and I actually went by and looked at it. But I think it might have moved on the second item of new business, there was a house barge at Butler Marina. And my first question is, and it was significant size and it stuck, what really was the initial issue was it stuck out into the access up to the public access at 4th Street. I went in there by boat and it was noticeable. But I believe, Beth, has that moved over to Port Annapolis?
It has.
Okay.
I
Because I
think
thought I
so,
saw it when I
because
went
saw it
out
yesterday.
over the week on Saturday. I thought that was the same one that's moved over there.
The thing is a monster. Yeah.
And Duncan, is it privately owned or is this a water B&B?
You know, I gotta tell you, I don't know. I'll find that out. I just saw it yesterday afternoon. I went, oh my God. So I'll
It
find
does
it.
have a,
It's
it
my
does have a
understanding
board
That they're
on
going
it.
to rent them out. It's my understanding they're going to rent them out.
Them
Rent
plural?
them out to get underway or rent them
That's
out?
the first one, according to somebody that works at Port Annapolis that I was racing with
Yeah,
a couple of weeks ago.
there's another one being built. It's on the hard right in the aft area of Port Annapolis. It's ready to be launched, I believe.
But
I'm gonna run it down.
I sent everybody a copy of the house. Well, maybe I didn't send it. I thought I sent everybody a copy of the house barge.
You did.
The reference to the house barge ordinance. And my recollection is, I think it's like one per 50 slips or something. And so Beth, I'm assuming that your office and the Office of Law are cognizant of and on top of the requirements for a permit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so what I would say is, I can't speak too much to house barges right now because I have too many open cases. But I would caution the group that there are a lot of things to think about. So I know that people on the outset might think that's a great idea. We should be open-minded and we should let all these houseboats come in. But I would encourage those that are proponents of this to do some research as to what's happened in other cities and why it is that we have the current ordinances, because it's not as simple as people may think.
No, it's not. And it requires a permit from planning and zoning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's limits on how many can be in any particular.
And I can tell the group that planning and zoning will not give you a permit.
Okay.
Because planning and zoning has decided, and I don't think they're wrong, that a boat is not a building or a structure and it's not on a concrete pad. And so it's not in concert with their, I think Title 17 or Title 12, I forget. So they can't help you. If you have a house barge and you want to do this, they can't help you because it's not in concert with their section of code.
Well, I might beg to disagree with them because 1514 specifically requires a permit issued by planning and zoning. And I don't think planning and zoning can unilaterally say, we're not going to deal with it. They just have to make sure that the house barge complies with all the requirements to obtain a permit. Now,
No,
requirements.
I hear you, but I would encourage you to speak to Mr. Manassa. His conversation with me was it was I understood what he was saying.
Okay, I mean, but I will say that the provisions for obtaining a permit and the standards in the code are would certainly make it challenging to have a house barge over whatever feet this is. But perhaps if anybody comes to your office and asks for thoughts on it, you just make a copy of 1514 and hand it to them and say, here's the requirements for starters, and good luck.
I think according to planning and zoning, it's more complicated than that. And what they would say is it's not a structure or a building. So we will not permit it because you can't properly plumb it. You can't properly electrify it. And we're concerned about people that are dwelling within. something. It doesn't
Well-
have proper like,
I don't, there's all sorts of permits. There's building permits, there's electrical permits. This is a house barge permit. It doesn't have, I don't think this code frankly discusses that it has to be an occupancy permit for a house. It's just another, it's a permit of a different kind and. you
well, I
know,
couldn't speak to what planning and zoning feels. But I can tell you they won't give you a permit for a house barge.
All right,
So I couldn't speak to what John Manassa feels or the director of planning and zoning, but I can just tell you, like sort of where the city is with that.
so if in fact the house barge that is parked at Port Annapolis and the one that is anticipated going in is greater than 20 feet in width, 46 feet in length, or 14 feet in height, excluding railings, awnings, antennas, or any similar appurtenances, then if it doesn't have a permit, then it's a code violation. And there ought to be a code enforcement action, I take it.
Correct, and I would encourage the folks that think that we should probably allow this to study what's happened in other cities.
But right now, we have an ordinance on the books.
We do.
And, you know, one of the problems we've had is that we kind of pick and choose what we want to enforce. But Duncan, do you know whether this particular, or maybe you can find out if this particular house barge, if it's bigger than the parameters, or if the parameters are such that it requires a permit, that's one thing. If it's smaller than the parameters, those parameters, it doesn't require a permit.
Yeah,
No, they all require a permit. So it talks about anything over 46 feet may not be in city waters for more than 48 hours. And if you conform to the standard, which is smaller than that, then you must have a permit. And planning and zoning will not give you a permit.
Beth, what's the number of that ordinance?
I don't know, but I do know that Terry provided it for everyone.
It's 15, Title 15, Section 14, and it's there's about 5 subsections to it. But just take a look at that because
And to just tell the group like where we are with this, I kind of knew this day was coming. Because there's been some house barges in the city for years. And we've kind of like said, oh, this isn't going to go well. But now for the one house barge, we have more than 15 complainants. And people are quite angry. So of course we don't have a choice other than to handle that enforcement wise. And then we have other complaints regarding another house barge at Annapolis or Eastport Yacht Center. So we always like to be proactive with enforcement, but we not always can be because we're so busy. So we're handling complaints because we have a multitude of complaints and constituents are quite angry.
Beth, are those complaints for the Port Annapolis location?
So the original complaints came from the Butler's Marina location.
Right.
And I only have one complaint for the Port Annapolis location. And I have 1 or 2 complaints for the Eastport Yacht Center location.
Okay, thank you.
so there a house barge conforming to the dimensions set forth in this section 15-14-10, which are the dimensions I read, 20 feet in width, 46 feet in length, or 14 feet in height. If it exceeds any of those, can be docked within a commercial, community, or public marina with 50 or more slips for the dockage of vessels. And the dockage of the house barge would not result in more than 2% of the facility's slips being occupied by house barges. So there's a limitation on the number. Beth, just for your edification, this came about this ordinance was enacted, I was going to say 10 years ago. It looks like it was 15 years ago, 04108, as a result of a house barge coming in on Spa Creek and there being no regulation for house barges. And so and that's how this came about in the first place. I think it might have been Atlantic Cruising Yachts or somebody had a house barge.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to that. You're the attorney and I certainly trust your, what you're saying. Although what I have heard is that this stuff came about in the 1980s and then 2008 it was revisited, particularly by this group, and nothing was changed. So other than that, I wouldn't have too much history.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't remember the 1980s. I'm just looking at when this particular legislation was first enacted in 2008. I remember this legislation. I don't remember any prior legislation or issue about it of any significance. Scott might remember.
The prior legislation was that you couldn't have a 2-story houseboat in the city of Annapolis.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Mhm.
This
Unless you were grandfathered in.
okay. Anyway, that's so that's just one we're going to keep. Well, I'm sure we'll be back and revisit. It's at least while we have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, real quick, because there are boats in the water that people do rent in an Airbnb or VRBO kind of fashion, right? What's the distinguishing language that makes the difference between a 46-foot Catalina and a
So
46?
I think you have to look at the definition of a house barge. And a house barge is defined as something that's primarily designed for dwelling instead of transiting. And so if I have a square thing that has to be towed by barges to get in and out of its slip, it's certainly a house barge. But if I have something called a house boat by a manufacturer, but it can really maneuver and transit on its own, then it sort of probably falls more into like a planning and zoning enforcement issue as it relates to short-term rentals. But if we have like this big square thing that has like a 6 horsepower and can't propel itself or maneuver itself, then it really definitely falls into the house barge definition as I understand it. And I have studied that definition pretty thoroughly.
And Mike, so before we got it, before the world became short-term rentals, you think about Seattle, there are a number of house barges, they call them house boats, with liveaboards that never move. And there's a whole, the whole culture of living on those along the waterfront on Lake Union in particular is the one I'm familiar with. And they are just part of the eclectic landscape out there. I think initially when some of this legislation, with this 08 legislation, nobody was thinking short-term rental. They were thinking liveaboard house barges, and weren't thinking short-term rental.
And I would also say that the higher courts, maybe even the Supreme Court, has started to differentiate between floating homes, house barges, and boats. Because a floating home, they're calling something different than a house barge, and then different than a boat.
It's going to continue to be an evolutionary issue. So before I entertain a motion to adjourn, let's take care of one housekeeping. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from May?
So moved.
Kimberly, let me back up. Kimberly, I have in here approved the minutes from April. I think we approved the minutes from April, did we not? This should
I
be.
think we did. Yeah.
We did, and so what's before us tonight is from May 16th.
Which everybody has a copy of. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And Debbie moved second, Frida second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Everybody all in favor. They all were in favor. Is there any other item on the agenda that anybody it has a burning desire to take up. Rest of it is just updates. I haven't read anything about anybody getting electrocuted at Truxton Park. I'm assuming street end parks are continuing to progress. There is a, I think there was a report coming up, and I'll be right with you, Frida. Duncan, can you check and see back on the comprehensive plan? I think that there was I saw a note that there was an update being presented to the planning commissioner. Somebody either may have been, or it was on the planning commission agenda as an update. If you can just check and see, maybe just send me a note if it was had, or whether or not it's upcoming, because then we can at least let everybody know that they want to listen to it.
Terry, I respect you as the chairman, but I have no idea what you just asked me to do.
Call Eric Lashinsky and ask him, when is the update to planning commission,
Thank you.
the comp plan? Yes, Frida.
So my question is about the MIAB. Am I up for July?
No, Andy Fagley is for June. Oh, are you for July? Hang on a minute.
I'm for next Monday.
Are you? Okay. And is
Right.
it in person, Andy?
I don't know. I went there twice trying to get to their meetings, and both times was unsuccessful in getting in the building.
Zoom.
You think this group
July, yes, Frida, you're July, but I would check online on their website, because they're only meeting like 4 times a year now.
Okay.
So you may luck out.
Okay. I'll check in. Thank you.
Yeah. Mike?
So Terry, I can comment on the comprehensive plan, as I got an email from a local attorney who's on top of his stuff to the president of the Eastport Business Association, citing from Terry Lomax, the Annapolis Ahead 2040 Comprehensive Plan 90-day public comment review period kickoff was supposed to be June 15th at the Planning Commission. So I don't know.
It was a 90-day review. It was a 90-day review. So Duncan, you're off the hook.
I don't know if that actually happened at the June 15th Planning Commission meeting, because I haven't had the pleasure of sitting through it, but that was the proposed schedule, I think.
Well, I'm glad
Okay.
you caught me, because I'm halfway through the email already.
Well, go ahead and send it. Maybe he'll give us an update.
I will.
All right. Anything else?
Thank you for bringing Eileen in, Terry. That was really enlightening.
It may have raised more questions than answers, but that's how the process goes. Yes, Andy.
Wanted to ask Beth whether she's had any complaints about the harbor line at South Annapolis Yachting Center with that really big sailboat on the end dock.
I have not.
Okay.
But if I do,
It looks
I'll
like
look at
it is from the Eastport side as you're coming across the bridge, but when you're out in the water, it doesn't look like a big deal. But I was
do you
just,
think it's bad?
oh, I don't know. But if it was 8 feet or something right there, that
Okay.
goes over it.
All right, well, if I get a complaint, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I'm not complaining.
Of course you're not.
And the neighbors there are on top of almost anything that's worthy of a complaint.
I'm sure.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Debbie, Andy second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Kimberly, thank you for staying late.